Little girl ran to her black mother crying, "They're beating me, mama." What the black woman? Before we start today's story, comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what's next. The courtroom became completely silent as the video began to play. The screen showed 3 police officers surrounding a terrified 7-year-old girl in a park. Every person in the room could feel the tension. Then Alicia Grant stood up. Even though she was wearing civilian clothes, her military posture was unmistakable, straight, calm, and full of quiet strength. "That's my daughter," she said, her voice steady and clear. "And now you're going to see what happens when you go after a child whose mother was trained to hunt predators." Before we begin this powerful story about justice, courage, and protection, imagine yourself in Alicia's shoes. If you believe in standing up against injustice, especially when it targets children, this story is for you. It shows what happens when those who are supposed to protect become the ones who cause harm, and how one mother's strength turns fear into power. The spring sunshine was warm against Alicia Grant's skin as she knelt in her garden that morning. She was transplanting small heirloom tomato seedlings, her hands steady as she moved each plant carefully. From her backyard, she could see the community playground through the fence. Every few minutes, she glanced up, watching the swings and slides where her daughter, 7-year-old Nia, played with her friend Emma. Nia's laughter occasionally rose above the usual sounds of the playground. Happy shouts, squeaky swings, and bouncing balls. Each time Alicia heard that sound, she smiled faintly, comforted by the simple peace of it. She had built this quiet, safe life piece by piece, after years of chaos and loss. At 34, Alicia had worked hard to create a stable life for her daughter. Oakwood Heights, the Atlanta suburb where they lived, had only recently begun welcoming black families. The decision to move there 6 months ago hadn't been easy. Alicia had done her research, reading community reports, crime statistics, and even old neighborhood newsletters. The area had a history of resisting integration, but the schools were excellent, and that mattered more than anything. Nia deserved the best education Alicia could give her. 3 years earlier, Alicia's husband, James, had died in Afghanistan. His helicopter had been shot down during a rescue mission. He'd been her teammate in the military and her partner in life. His loss left a hole that could never truly heal. From that day on, Alicia had made it her mission to provide a stable, loving home for their daughter. Before becoming a mother, Alicia had built a remarkable military career. She was one of the first black women ever to serve as a Navy Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman, an elite role in the Navy's special operations. Her training had been brutal and demanding, but she had excelled. The Navy had taught her to survive under pressure, to identify threats in seconds, to move unseen in dangerous environments, and to respond to danger with calm precision. For 12 years, she had served in missions that would never appear on official records. Quiet, dangerous work done far from home. But when James died, Alicia knew she had to leave that life behind. Her daughter needed at least one parent with a steady job and a predictable routine. So she built a new career in hospital administration. Her leadership skills and calm approach to crises made her stand out, and within a few years, she became a rising star in her field. That morning, as she wiped the sweat from her forehead, she looked up at the playground again. But this time, she couldn't see Nia on the swing where she'd been playing just minutes before. Alicia stood up slowly, scanning the area. Her military-trained eyes moved with purpose, checking every part of the playground. Then she noticed several children running from the far side of the park, their faces full of fear. Something was wrong. Her pulse quickened. She dropped her gardening trowel and moved toward the fence. "Nia!" she called out, her voice firm but controlled. Suddenly, the side gate flew open. Nia came running into the yard, crying uncontrollably. Her face was streaked with tears, her clothes dirty and torn. "They're beating me, Mama! They're beating me!" she screamed, her voice shaking. In that instant, Alicia's instincts took over. Without thinking, she scooped her daughter into her arms, her body automatically shifting to protect her. Her eyes scanned the park for danger. Then she saw them, 3 police officers walking toward her yard, one of them pointing directly at her. His expression was cold, confident, and full of authority. Alicia recognized that look. It was the look of someone who believed they were in the right, no matter the truth. Holding Nia tightly, Alicia noticed the dark bruise forming on her daughter's arm. There was a bleeding scrape on her knee, and dirt all over her shirt. The anger that surged inside Alicia was fierce and raw, but she controlled it. Her training taught her to channel her emotions, to use them, not be ruled by them. "Inside now," Alicia said firmly, carrying Nia into the house while keeping her eyes on the approaching officers. Once inside, she locked the door and knelt in front of her trembling child. "Baby, tell me what happened. Quickly." Through her sobs, Nia told her the story. She'd been playing with Emma's new doll, which Emma had kindly let her borrow. Then another parent, Helen Morris, the mother of a girl named Lily, had accused her of stealing it. Emma tried to defend Nia, but Helen didn't believe her. Instead, she called the police. When the officers arrived, they came toward Nia fast, shouting and looking angry. Scared, she ran away. One officer grabbed her arm so hard it hurt, and she fell to the ground. Before Alicia could respond, there was loud pounding on the front door. The officers were shouting for her to open it. Alicia's mind switched into tactical mode. 3 armed officers outside. 1 terrified child inside. Unknown intentions, but they'd already shown they could use force against a child. Her training gave her a dozen ways to deal with the threat. But she was also a mother. She couldn't let this turn violent, not in front of her daughter. "Nia, go to your room and stay there until I call you," Alicia said softly but firmly. She quickly took out her phone and snapped photos of Nia's injuries. Then she activated her home security cameras to record everything. Standing tall, she moved toward the front door. "Remember what Mama taught you?" she asked before opening it. Nia nodded through her tears. "Sometimes we have to be brave in different ways," she whispered. "That's right," Alicia said, calm but ready. "And today, that's what we're going to do." When she opened the door, 3 police officers stood on her porch. The lead officer was a tall white man with a buzz cut and a hard stare. His badge said Blake. Next to him was a younger white officer, Jason, who looked nervous. The third officer was black, Marcus, and his face showed quiet unease. "Ma'am, we need to speak with the juvenile who just entered this residence," Officer Blake said, his tone cold and commanding. "She's wanted in connection with a theft at the park." Alicia stayed in the doorway, standing tall but relaxed. "My daughter is 7 years old," she said evenly. "Why are 3 armed officers at my home over a child's playground argument?" Blake frowned. "Ma'am, we don't need to explain police procedure to you. A theft was reported, and we're investigating. Step aside so we can speak with the girl." Alicia noticed how his hand drifted near his holster, a subtle intimidation move. She'd seen it many times before in her military career. "Officer Blake," she said calmly, using his name to remind him she was paying attention. "I want to know exactly what my daughter is accused of stealing, who made the accusation, and why one of your officers thought it was appropriate to grab a child hard enough to leave bruises." Jason shifted awkwardly, glancing at Blake. Marcus looked down, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Listen, lady," Blake said impatiently. "We got a call about your kid taking property that wasn't hers. When we tried to talk to her, she ran. That's suspicious behavior. We acted according to protocol." From the sidewalk, Alicia saw Helen Morris, the woman who had called the police, walking toward her house in designer workout clothes, pointing at Alicia's yard and talking loudly to another officer. Several neighbors had stepped out onto their porches, watching the drama unfold. Alicia kept her face calm, but her mind recorded every detail. Names, badge numbers, exact words. "My daughter ran because she was scared," she said. "She's 7 years old. She was playing with a toy her friend lent her. That's not theft." Blake took a step closer, trying to push his authority. "If there's no problem, then you won't mind if we come in and sort this out," he said. "I do mind," Alicia replied calmly. "You don't have a warrant to enter my home, and since your actions already scared my child, I'm not giving you permission." Blake, face reddened. "Interfering with a police investigation is obstruction of justice," he snapped. "I'll ask you one more time to cooperate before we consider other options." His hand moved to his handcuffs. Alicia didn't flinch. "Officer Blake," she said, her voice steady, "I should let you know that my home security cameras have been recording since you stepped onto my property. If you want to question my daughter about a toy, you can do it right here on the porch, with me present." Something shifted in the air. Jason took a small step back. Marcus relaxed slightly. Blake's expression faltered, but he forced it back into a scowl. "Fine," he said. "Bring her out." Alicia called for Nia. The little girl appeared, peeking out from behind her mother, her eyes wide and fearful. Alicia placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Nia, the officers want to ask you about what happened at the park. Just tell them the truth." Nia nodded, her voice trembling but clear. She explained everything again, that Emma had let her borrow the doll, that Helen accused her of stealing it, and that she had gotten scared when the police came yelling at her. Officer Marcus knelt down, trying to sound gentle. "What happened when we arrived, sweetheart?" Nia's grip on Alicia's leg tightened. "You came really fast toward me." The big officer was yelling. "I got scared because you had guns. I ran to find my mom. Then someone grabbed me really hard and pushed me down." Marcus looked up at Blake, clearly disturbed. Before anyone could respond, a small voice came from the sidewalk. "She's telling the truth. I said she could use my doll." It was Emma Davis, standing next to her mother, Clara. Emma looked upset, her little hands clenched. "Lily's mom is just being mean again," she said. Clara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder but didn't contradict her. Blake looked irritated. "We still need to address the fact that she ran from officers," he said stubbornly. Alicia's tone changed, still calm, but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Officers, my daughter told you the truth. Her friend just confirmed it. There was no theft. She ran because she was frightened, and any child would have done the same. Now, are you finished terrifying her, or should I call my lawyer about police harassment and excessive force against a minor?" That was the final blow. The mention of a lawyer, the cameras, the witnesses, all of it forced Blake to back down. "We'll note in our report that the theft claim was unfounded," he said stiffly. "But your daughter should learn to respect police authority." As the officers walked away, Blake turned and muttered, "You might want to watch that attitude, ma'am. It doesn't serve you well in this neighborhood." Alicia held his gaze until they were gone. Only when the door closed did she let the calm mask fall. She knelt and gathered Nia in her arms. Nia clung to her mother, crying hard again. "Did I do something wrong, Mama?" she sobbed. Alicia pressed her daughter's head against her shoulder. "No, baby," she whispered. "You did everything right." Outside, the sun still shone over the quiet neighborhood, but for Alicia, everything had changed. She knew this wasn't just about a doll. It was about something much bigger. And she also knew one thing for sure. If the world tried to harm her daughter again, it would learn just how dangerous love could be when held in the hands of a mother trained to fight. Alicia felt something break deep inside her chest, like a crack spreading between two versions of America, the one she had fought to protect during her military service, and the one her daughter was living in now. "No, baby," she whispered softly, stroking Nia's braids. Her voice stayed calm even though she could feel anger rising inside her like fire. "You didn't do anything wrong at all." As she held her shaking, scared daughter, Alicia's mind began to move in the sharp, organized way it always did when she faced danger. She started thinking through resources, allies, and possible enemies. The warrior inside her, the part that had been quiet for years, was waking up again. "This isn't over," she thought. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Alicia called the hospital's administration office and asked for a personal day, something she had never done before in her 2 years working there. She had a reputation for being unshakable and efficient. People at Atlanta Metropolitan Hospital respected her for how she managed crises calmly and improved emergency procedures. She had even created safety programs that won awards. Everyone saw her as calm, focused, and completely reliable. But very few people knew that Alicia had a military background. She had carefully avoided talking about that part of her life. She didn't want people to treat her differently or fear her because of her military training. Now, sitting alone in her small home office while Nia slept in, Still worn out and frightened from the day before, Alicia began her research. She worked methodically, like she always had during missions. Her first call was to Jason Martinez, a trusted friend from her Navy days. He now worked in federal law enforcement. "I need background checks on 3 officers from the Oakwood Heights Police Department," she said right away, skipping any small talk. "Nothing illegal, just what's publicly available. Service records, complaints, things like that." Jason didn't ask why. In their old unit, the rule had always been simple. You help first, ask questions later. 2 hours later, the information appeared in Alicia's encrypted email. Officer Richard Blake had been on the police force for 17 years and had 6 complaints of using excessive force, all dismissed without punishment. Officer Kevin Jason was new, with only 8 months on the job and no complaints yet. Officer Marcus had served 4 years in Oakwood Heights after leaving the Army, where he had worked as a military police officer in Iraq. Alicia kept digging. The deeper she went, the clearer the pattern became. The Oakwood Heights Police Department had a history of harsh policing, especially in areas that had recently become more diverse. Black residents were stopped, questioned, and ticketed far more often than white residents. There was also no civilian oversight board, something the county had recommended after other troubling arrests nearby. Her next call was to Rachel Diaz, another former teammate from the military who was now a lawyer specializing in civil rights. Alicia told her exactly what had happened to Nia, describing every detail carefully and calmly. Rachel's advice was firm and direct. Document everything. Get the medical records. Talk to witnesses. File a complaint with Internal Affairs, but don't expect them to be fair. Reach out to the NAACP and other organizations. Build strength through numbers, Alicia. And be ready, they won't like being challenged. After scheduling an appointment with Nia's pediatrician to officially document her injuries, Alicia drove to the neighborhood park. She timed her visit for when kids would be in school, but some parents might still be around. She spotted Clara Davis, the mother of Nia's classmate Emma, walking her dog near the path. Alicia waved and smiled, hiding the purpose of her approach behind a friendly face. "I wanted to thank you and Emma for speaking up yesterday," Alicia began, watching Clara's expression closely. "That whole thing was awful," Clara replied, her face full of sympathy. "I'm so sorry for what happened to Nia. Helen Morris has been a problem since we moved here. She's always watching the new families, always suspicious." That one conversation gave Alicia valuable information. Clara revealed that Helen had called the police at least 4 times in the past few months on black residents for so-called suspicious behavior. But those people had only been doing normal things: jogging, taking photos of homes for sale, delivering packages. Clara even gave Alicia names of neighbors who had seen these incidents. Before they parted, Clara hesitated. "I should probably tell you this," she said. "There's a neighborhood social media group, and Helen and some others are posting about what happened yesterday. They're saying the police stopped a theft and that outsiders are causing trouble. Some of us tried to correct them, but it's getting ugly. You should be aware of what they're saying." Alicia thanked her and added "monitor social media" to her growing list of action items. Over the next few hours, Alicia reached out to other minority residents in Oakwood Heights. Their stories sounded painfully familiar. The Thomas family said they had been pulled over multiple times for no reason. The Rodriguez family shared that police once questioned their teenage son for loitering outside his own home. Every story fits into the same disturbing pattern. By afternoon, Alicia had enough evidence to take to a professional. She met with Marcus Jordan, a former military JAG officer who now worked as a civil rights attorney. His downtown office was filled with framed newspaper clippings about successful cases against police departments across Georgia. "You've built a solid start," Jordan said after going through her files. "You could argue both individual misconduct and a broader pattern of discrimination. But you need to be prepared. Once you go after a police department, especially one like Oakwood Heights, you become a target. They'll dig into your background, follow your every move, and look for any weakness they can use against you. Are you ready for that?" "I was trained to go behind enemy lines," Alicia said without hesitation. "This is familiar territory." Jordan nodded. "All right then. Let's make a plan." Together, They built a careful strategy. File official complaints with Internal Affairs, the police chief, and the mayor's office. Gather witness statements and evidence. Build a community coalition to show this wasn't just about one family. Prepare for retaliation. Document everything, Jordan reminded her. Every patrol car that passes your house, every comment at school, every phone call, write it down. You'll need proof of the pattern. When Alicia returned home, she found a voicemail from Nia's school counselor. The counselor said Nia had been crying while describing the police encounter and wanted to meet to talk about how to support her. Hearing that made Alicia's chest ache. The fury she'd been holding back almost burst through her calm. That night, after reading extra bedtime stories and comforting her daughter, Alicia finally allowed herself to break down. Alone in her office, surrounded by papers, maps, and evidence, she cried silently. The anger, fear, and exhaustion of having to fight a system that saw her daughter as a suspect instead of a child, all of it poured out in quiet sobs. When she was done, she wiped her tears, straightened her back, and went back to work. The next evening, Alicia hosted the first community strategy meeting in her living room. Neighbors who had experienced harassment came, along with parents worried about their kids' safety and people who simply wanted justice. The room filled with stories, frustration, and determination. When everyone quieted, Alicia stood up and spoke with calm authority. "They came for my child," she said, her voice strong but steady. "I won't let them come for anyone else's." She looked around the room, her eyes filled with determination. Have you ever seen something unfair and felt helpless to stop it? If you believe parents have the right and duty to fight for their children when authority fails them, then you understand why we're here. This isn't just about Nia anymore. This is about all of us. Later that night, Alicia sat in front of her laptop, watching the footage from her home security cameras. The high-definition video showed everything clearly: the officers' aggressive body language, their intimidating tone. She paused and zoomed in on Officer Blake's movements, noting every detail. She matched timestamps with witness accounts, organized her files by category, and mapped out key events on a whiteboard. Her dining table had become her command center, stacked with folders, maps, and strategy notes. 2 weeks after the incident, Alicia met with Dr. Aisha Evelyn, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. They sat together in a quiet observation room while Nia completed her therapy session on the other side of a one-way mirror. "She's showing clear signs of acute stress," Dr. Evelyn said gently. "The nightmares, the jumpiness, her fear of going outside, all classic signs. But the hardest part is that she now believes the police might take her away from you." Alicia felt her stomach twist but stayed composed. "Will you document all this in your report?" she asked. "Of course," Dr. Evelyn said. "I'll prepare a full written assessment. I've seen other kids traumatized by similar encounters. You'll need this for your case." Alicia added the report to her growing stack of evidence. Then she filed an official complaint with the Oakwood Heights Police Department's Internal Affairs Office. The complaint described everything: the officer's behavior, Nia's trauma, the excessive use of force, and the baseless accusation. She sent identical certified letters to the police chief and the mayor, just as Jordan had advised. Her next move was meeting James Wilson, a respected local NAACP leader who had decades of experience fighting civil rights battles. After reading through her file, Wilson looked impressed. "You've done a lot of groundwork, Alicia," he said. "But remember, this isn't just about paperwork. You need community pressure, enough that the department can't pretend this was an isolated mistake." With Wilson's guidance, Alicia's coalition began to grow. She connected with influential people from across the community: Black, white, and Latino. Clara Davis, the same neighbor who had helped her earlier, became one of her key supporters. "The safety angle works," Clara explained during one of their meetings. "When other parents realize that what happened to Nia could happen to any child, they start paying attention. It stops being just a race issue. It becomes about protecting all kids." Alicia's investigation kept uncovering new information. Through Freedom of Information Act requests filed by Jordan, they discovered that Oakwood Heights police officers only received 4 hours of training in de-escalation but 60 hours of firearms and restraint tactics. That was far below national standards. Even worse, The complaint record showed that complaints from white residents were formally investigated 3 times more often than identical complaints from black residents. When Tina Rodriguez, an investigative journalist from the Atlanta Tribune, heard about Alicia's case, she reached out. "This isn't just one bad day," Tina told her during their first meeting. "You've uncovered a pattern of discrimination. This deserves to be public." When the Tribune published Alicia's story on the front page, it included clear still images from her home's security footage. The police department issued a defensive statement claiming that the officers acted appropriately and that they stood by their professional conduct. The dismissive tone of their statement only made the public angrier. Alicia responded with even more evidence, proving that their explanation didn't match the truth. Behind the scenes, tension was rising inside the department. Alicia learned that officers Jason and Marcus were both uncomfortable with what had happened but were being pressured to support Blake. Jason, the rookie, had joined the force with hopes of protecting his community. Now, he was realizing the reality was very different. Marcus, with his military background, quietly empathized with Alicia. As Alicia's campaign gained attention, intimidation began. Police cars started parking near her home for long stretches of time, their presence clearly meant to scare her. Online, social media accounts supporting the department began posting nasty comments, calling Alicia a liar, and even questioning her patriotism despite her service. Helen Morris became louder too, organizing a Support Our Police campaign meant to discredit Alicia's movement. But instead of backing down, Alicia took it as confirmation that her actions were working. Using her military training, she documented everything. The times police cars appeared near her house, their license numbers, and the names of visible officers. She also tightened security for her community meetings, changing locations often and keeping communication secure. Through it all, Alicia stayed calm, steady, and strategic. She was no longer just a hospital manager or a mother defending her daughter. She was leading a movement, turning her pain into purpose, her anger into action, and her discipline into power. Alicia Grant, the soldier, strategist, and mother, was now fighting a new kind of battle. And this time, she wasn't fighting for a flag or a country overseas. She was fighting for justice at home, for her daughter, for her neighbors, and for every child who deserved to grow up without fear. When Superintendent Sharon Davis from the school district reached out about Nia's continuing struggles with attendance and anxiety, Alicia knew this was a chance to speak about more than just her daughter. She understood that what was happening to Nia was part of something much bigger, something that affected many families in the community. "This isn't just about my daughter," Alicia said firmly during their meeting. "Children across the district are learning dangerous lessons about who gets protected and who gets policed in our community." At first, Superintendent Davis seemed unsure. She didn't want to get involved in something that sounded like a fight with the police. But as more parents and teachers shared similar stories, she began to realize that Alicia's concerns were real and widespread. 3 weeks into Alicia's campaign, a surprising message came from an unexpected source. Officer Marcus, a quiet man who had always seemed uneasy about some of his colleagues, reached out through a trusted go-between. He asked for a private, confidential meeting. They met in a small coffee shop just 20 meters from Oakwood Heights. The atmosphere was tense. Marcus looked around before speaking softly. "There's a WhatsApp group," he said. "Some officers use it to share information about where to increase patrols. They've been targeting streets where black families have recently moved in. Officer Blake is one of the ringleaders, but the attitude comes from higher up. He couldn't hand over hard evidence without risking his career or safety." Still, his words confirmed what Alicia had long suspected. Racial bias inside the department wasn't just a rumor. It was real, organized, and dangerous. This conversation gave her new direction and motivation. As word spread, the community coalition continued to grow. Meetings became so large they had to move to bigger spaces to fit everyone. Alicia worked hard to make sure that no one saw her as the only leader. She encouraged others, especially longtime community members, to take active roles. "In the military, I learned that the strongest weapon isn't your gun," she told the group during one meeting. "It's your team. Each of us brings something powerful: legal skills, media connections, community influence, and personal stories. Together, we're unstoppable." As the evidence of bias grew stronger, the lines in the community became clear. On one side stood Alicia and her growing coalition, demanding truth and reform. On the other were police leaders and their supporters, desperate to hold on to their power and avoid scrutiny. Finally, under increasing pressure, Chief Robert agreed to hold a community forum, the first real sign that the department was feeling the heat. Alicia prepared carefully. Her presentation mixed hard evidence with heartfelt emotion. She knew facts alone weren't enough. People had to feel the truth. While her home security camera recorded her practice speech, Nia stood quietly in the doorway, watching her mother with serious eyes. "You're fighting the bad police, aren't you, Mama?" she asked softly after Alicia finished. Alicia knelt to meet her daughter's gaze. She spoke gently but firmly. "I'm fighting for a world where no child feels afraid of the people who are supposed to keep them safe. Sometimes that means standing up and saying, 'This is wrong,' even when it's hard." Nia nodded, remembering something her mother had once told her. "Like when you said sometimes we have to be brave in different ways." If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and share your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a heart to show your support. Alicia smiled and hugged her close. "Exactly like that, baby. Exactly like that." The community forum turned out to be a major success. Alicia's carefully prepared speech struck the perfect balance, truthful, emotional, and powerful. She presented records, photos, and testimonies. Other residents spoke too, including white families whose children had witnessed Nia's traumatic encounter with police. Their voices helped people see that this wasn't just a black issue, but a community issue. Even Chief Robert struggled to dismiss what was said. The police department announced that they would launch a thorough internal review. It wasn't justice yet, but it was the first official sign that they couldn't simply ignore Alicia's claims. Alicia wasn't fooled. She knew this was just a temporary retreat, a chance for the department to regroup and plan their counterattack. It came the very next morning. The police union released a press statement defending the officers and attacking Alicia's credibility. "While we respect the concerns of all community members," the statement read, "this incident has been distorted by individuals with personal grievances against law enforcement. The officers involved followed all departmental protocols." A few hours later, a pro-police news site posted a story claiming that sources within the department questioned Alicia's mental stability. They pointed to her military background and hinted that she might be suffering from PTSD, suggesting that her perceptions couldn't be trusted. It was a cruel and predictable attack, and Alicia had expected it. She responded immediately through her lawyer, Attorney Jordan, with a calm but firm public statement. "My military service involved specialized training in threat assessment, de-escalation, and proper use of force. That training makes me especially qualified to recognize when those standards are violated. I served my country with honor to protect American values, one of which is the right to equal protection under the law." The statement was accompanied by a letter from her former commanding officer, Captain James Harris, now a respected Pentagon official. His strong endorsement gave her words even more weight. From that moment, the conflict turned into an information war. A woman named Helen Morris, who supported the police, started a Support Our Police campaign. She put up yard signs, organized online pages, and spoke at local events. Her speeches talked about safety and supporting officers who make split-second decisions. She avoided mentioning race, but everyone knew who her message was really aimed at. The intimidation soon got personal. Alicia started noticing patrol cars following her wherever she drove. Parking tickets appeared on her car for nonsense violations, being 12 inches from the curb, parking too long while dropping Nia off. Unmarked cars parked outside her house for hours, photographing visitors. Then came something worse, an anonymous call to Child Protective Services, accusing her of neglect and exposing her child to dangerous activities. The claim triggered a mandatory home visit. Though the case was quickly dismissed as false, it terrified Nia and pushed her deeper into anxiety. "They're trying to scare us, wear us down, and cut us off from support," Alicia told her core team during an emergency meeting at Clara Davis's home, away from cameras and microphones. "These are classic counterinsurgency tactics. I've seen them used in war zones. The good news is, I've been trained to fight back." And she did. Whenever the opposition attacked, Alicia's team responded strategically. When social media accounts tried to label her as an angry black woman, her coalition released heartfelt video messages from diverse community members who had faced similar problems. When local politicians were pressured to denounce her campaign, Alicia's supporters flooded them with calls emphasizing that they weren't against the police. They were fighting for fair and safe policing for everyone. The department's internal investigation finally concluded, and, as expected, it found no violations of policy. Alicia wasn't surprised. She had already started pushing other pressure points, legal, political, and public. But the attacks continued. Soon, calls began coming into the hospital where Alicia worked. People were questioning whether she was using hospital resources for her personal war against the police. Her boss, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, called her in for a private conversation. "Someone's been contacting board members and administrators," Dr. Chen said gently. "They're accusing you of mixing activism with your hospital work. I've defended you. Your performance here is excellent, but I need to understand what's happening." Alicia explained everything clearly. The incident with Nia, the threats, the smear campaign. "I've kept my work and advocacy completely separate," she said. "But this pressure on the hospital, it's a strategy. They're trying to isolate me by threatening my livelihood." Dr. Chen's face softened. "My parents came from Taiwan in the 1970s, she said quietly. "The first week after we moved into our new neighborhood, police knocked on our door because someone reported suspicious Asians. Some things haven't changed as much as we'd like to believe. The hospital stands behind you, Alicia." That support lifted a huge weight off Alicia's shoulders. It allowed her to focus on what came next. Her next move was a major interview with the Atlanta Tribune. She used it to take back control of the story. "I swore an oath to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic," she said calmly. "That oath didn't expire when I left active duty. When the systems meant to protect people start harming them, standing up against that is part of continuing my service." The interview went viral. Veterans around the country spoke up in her defense. They said Alicia's service made her more qualified, not less, to speak on issues of justice. The police department suddenly looked unpatriotic for trying to smear a decorated veteran. Meanwhile, Clara Davis's role in the coalition grew. As a white mother, she used her voice to reach families who might not have listened otherwise. "When I tell my neighbors that what happened to Nia could happen to Emma, or to any of our kids, it changes how they see it," she said during meetings. Then came another big turning point. Officer Marcus, growing more disgusted with his department's corruption, began sending inside information to Alicia's team through secure channels. His tips helped them predict the department's next moves and stay one step ahead. Things escalated again when Alicia's garage door was spray-painted with the words, "Race traitors, get out." The attack was clearly meant to threaten her and her white allies. But it backfired. Within hours, neighbors, black, white, Latino, and Asian, showed up with paint and brushes. They scrubbed away the graffiti, repainted the door, and even set up a neighborhood watch to protect her home. The act of hate ended up uniting the community even more. When Chief Robert held a press conference saying the department found no wrongdoing, Alicia immediately countered. She presented her own independent investigation, complete with videos, medical records, eyewitness accounts, and expert analysis. It was undeniable. Not long after, the police department quietly offered a settlement deal. It included a large payment and a non-disclosure agreement to keep her quiet. Alicia refused. "This isn't about money," she said firmly. "It's about justice and lasting change." By then, even the local media, which had once doubted her, started taking her side. National civil rights organizations offered support, realizing her case could set a major precedent for police accountability. As the department faced growing pressure, they offered another deal. More money, small reforms, but still no admission of guilt. "They just want this to disappear," Attorney Jordan said. "We're not settling for that," Alicia replied. "This isn't about small fixes. We're fighting for transformation." Alicia then reached out to her national network of former military colleagues, many now working in government, journalism, and advocacy. Their expertise and influence gave her campaign resources and strategic power the local police had never faced before. What began as one mother's fight against intimidation had now become a nationwide movement for justice. 3 months into the campaign, Alicia stood in her bathroom at 2 in the morning, staring into the mirror. Her reflection showed the toll: dark circles under her eyes, tension lines around her mouth, hollow cheeks from skipped meals. The physical exhaustion she could handle. The military had trained her for that. But the constant pressure, the fear, the loneliness of leadership, it was wearing her down. She was always alert, double-checking locks and security cameras, unable to rest. Nia noticed. One afternoon, she asked softly, "Are you sick, Mama? You look tired all the time." The question hit Alicia harder than any public attack. She realized her daughter could feel the weight she was carrying. That night, she looked at the clock and decided to make a call she hadn't made in years. She dialed a number in Virginia. "It's time," she said quietly when the line picked up. "Sorry for the late call." "No problem," came the alert voice of Lieutenant Commander Alicia Hernandez, her former team leader and trusted friend. "Status report," Hernandez said without hesitation. "Engaged in extended domestic operation with strong opposition," Alicia replied, slipping naturally back into their old military code. "Experiencing mission fatigue. Concerned about collateral effects on the principal asset I'm protecting." Hernandez understood right away what Alicia was calling about. "How's your daughter handling the stress she's picking up from you?" he asked directly. That blunt question was exactly what Alicia had wanted. She didn't need soft words or pity. She wanted someone who could cut straight to the point. Hernandez was like that, honest, practical, and focused on solutions. For the next 40 minutes, they talked about managing stress in high-pressure situations and how Alicia could apply the same techniques she used during her military service to her current struggles at home and in her community. "You're in a long, uneven fight against an opponent with more power and resources," Hernandez summarized. "That's not much different from the kinds of missions we trained for. The only difference is that now you're also a mother trying to maintain a normal life. The stress you're feeling is completely predictable, and it can be managed. But you need solid support systems." By the time their call ended, Alicia had a practical plan for controlling her stress, one she could use just like any tactical routine. She'd treat her emotional health the way she used to handle military strategy, with discipline, planning, and consistency. The next morning brought a new problem. The community coalition she had built, the group fighting for justice after what happened to her daughter, was starting to fall apart. The campaign had gone on much longer than anyone expected, and people were getting tired. At a meeting held in the church community room, the tension finally broke into an open argument. "We need to be louder," said James Wilson from the NAACP. "Let's organize peaceful protests outside the police department. Maybe even acts of civil disobedience. We need to force people to pay attention." Clara Davis, one of the white parents, immediately shook her head. "If we get confrontational, we'll lose the moderate supporters," she said. "We should be focusing on policy reform and political channels, not protests that make us look extreme." The discussion quickly got heated. Underneath the surface, old racial tensions began to show. Some members, especially black parents, felt the police had always been unfair and violent toward their communities. Others, mostly white, had never personally experienced police mistreatment and thought slower, formal political reform would be enough. Alicia sat quietly, watching. She recognized this pattern. She'd seen it before in military coalitions made up of different groups. At first, everyone united around a common goal, but as time passed and progress slowed, divisions began to appear. It was part of a long campaign. Instead of interrupting, Alicia let the arguments play out. She knew from experience that forcing calm too early would only push the anger underground, where it would grow into something worse. When the shouting finally stopped, she stood and spoke in her calm, commanding tone, the same voice that had made her a respected leader in the Navy. "Every point I've heard tonight is valid," she began, looking each person in the eye. "Different approaches aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. Each one reaches a different audience. What matters is coordination. We need to make sure our tactics work together instead of against each other." Her words quieted the room. Over the next hour, Alicia guided the group through a discussion that transformed the argument into a new, balanced plan. They agreed to combine their efforts, Some would focus on legal and political reform, while others organized peaceful direct actions that drew attention and urgency. By the end of the meeting, the coalition felt stronger and more united than before. But as that challenge eased, a new one appeared. Helen Morris had started attacking Alicia personally. In public forums and social media posts, she accused Alicia of being an unfit mother and suggested that her military background made her unstable and dangerous. The attacks hit Alicia deeply. Her identity as a mother and her complicated feelings about her military past were both raw, personal parts of her life. Her first instinct was anger, to lash out and defend herself. But she stopped herself. She knew this was a tactic, a psychological attack meant to provoke her and damage her reputation. She refused to give them that victory. That evening, as tensions in the community grew, an unexpected message reached Alicia. Officer Kevin Jason, through Clara Davis, asked to meet with her privately. Alicia was cautious. It could easily be a setup, an attempt to trap her into saying something that could be used against her. After careful vetting and planning, she agreed to meet him in a neutral spot in a neighboring county. When Jason arrived, he was in plain clothes, nervous, avoiding her eyes. "They've been targeting you," he finally admitted. "There are actual orders to dig up anything that can discredit you. Tickets, old violations, personal information, anything they can use to make you look bad." Hearing it out loud confirmed what Alicia had already suspected. Now she had first-hand proof that the department had launched a coordinated campaign to silence her through intimidation and character attacks. She didn't take that information lightly. She also knew the moral risk of encouraging an officer to speak against his own department. So she told him clearly, "This isn't about destroying the police. It's about making them worthy of the badge. Officers who care about integrity should want accountability." That statement seemed to lift a weight from Jason's shoulders. As Alicia's campaign gained more attention, the pressure grew. Death threats started arriving through mail and social media. She had to increase security at her home and at every community meeting. The media picked up her story, which brought national attention, but also new waves of harassment. Some members of her coalition quit after being threatened at work or receiving warnings from anonymous callers. The police department's plan, to isolate Alicia and wear her down, seemed to be working. The public support around her grew quieter, but the small group that stayed with her was completely loyal. The growing stress forced Alicia to rethink her strategy. The military had taught her an important truth. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. Adaptation was essential. She called a secret meeting with her closest advisors at Jordan's law office, a place far enough from her usual meeting spaces to avoid being watched or recorded. "We need to change tactics," she said. "They think they can just wait us out, assuming the community's energy will fade. We can't let this turn into a war of exhaustion. We need to strike decisively." The new strategy was smart. Instead of focusing on just Nia's case, they would expose the entire system of racial bias within the Oakwood Heights Police Department. Alicia's team began gathering and analyzing data, traffic stops, use of force records, citizen complaints. The statistics showed huge racial differences that couldn't be explained away by crime rates or population numbers. The evidence pointed clearly to discrimination built into the department's culture. This change in focus, from individual officers to the system itself, was powerful. It shifted attention to the leadership, the policies, and the culture that allowed bias to grow. But the long campaign was taking a toll at home. Alicia barely had time to rest. Her late nights and constant meetings began to affect her relationship with her daughter, Nia. Their bedtime reading sessions had become rare. Their laughter was disappearing, replaced by a heavy seriousness even a 7-year-old could feel. One night, Alicia came home late from a meeting to find Nia still awake. The little girl was holding her favorite stuffed animal and looked small and sad. "I miss you being just my mom," Nia whispered when Alicia sat beside her. "You're always busy fighting now." The words hit Alicia harder than any insult or threat. Was she sacrificing her daughter's childhood for a fight that might never be won? Alicia sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "I miss that too, baby," she said softly. "Can I tell you something I learned in the Navy?" Nia nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight for ourselves," Alicia said. They're the ones we fight so others don't have to face the same pain. What happened to you in the park was wrong, and if we don't stand up and say that, it'll keep happening to other kids. Nia thought about that for a moment. So, you're teaching me to be brave, Mama? She asked quietly. Yes, Alicia said, her voice breaking a little. Being brave doesn't always mean fighting back right away. Sometimes it means standing up later and saying, this was wrong, and it needs to change. That conversation changed Alicia. From then on, she stopped trying to keep her life as a mother and her life as an activist separate. She blended them. She included Nia in small, age-appropriate parts of her campaign and made sure to spend real, quiet time with her. This balance gave her strength she hadn't felt in months. With renewed clarity, Alicia took her campaign to the next level. She worked closely with Attorney Jordan and the core coalition members to compile a massive report on the department's racial bias. Every detail was supported by evidence, statistics, expert opinions, and documents. She stopped reacting to the department's moves and started setting the pace. She released information strategically to key officials and journalists, forcing the conversation to stay on her terms. Her biggest move came when she officially submitted all the evidence to the Georgia Attorney General's office, requesting a full investigation into the department's practices. This step bypassed the local authorities entirely. Meanwhile, Alicia remembered Hernandez's advice. She practiced the stress management methods he'd taught her, making sure she stayed healthy enough to lead effectively. She realized that her strength as a leader came from her well-being as a person, and as a mother. For months after that terrible day when Nia had run crying home from the park, the Georgia Attorney General's office made a public announcement. The Office of the Attorney General has opened a formal investigation into alleged patterns of discriminatory policing within the Oakwood Heights Police Department. The press release didn't name Alicia directly, but referred to substantial evidence provided by community members. The meaning was clear. Alicia's work had been taken seriously. Within hours, Police Chief Robert held a press conference. His usual confidence was gone. This investigation is unnecessary interference in local law enforcement, he said stiffly. Our officers follow strict procedures to protect all citizens equally. But his voice trembled. Everyone could tell he was nervous. His defensive tone made it clear that he knew the truth was against him. For Alicia, watching the live stream from her hospital office, it was a moment of quiet triumph. She didn't celebrate out loud, but she felt a deep, steady satisfaction. The power balance had shifted. Her fight had reached a level no one could ignore. The impact was immediate. Officer Blake was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Several department leaders began distancing themselves from the most aggressive officers, trying to present themselves as reformers. Then, something remarkable happened. Former Police Commissioner Thomas Jenkins, who had retired 3 years earlier, publicly supported the investigation. Good policing requires accountability, he said. When officers betray public trust, they make every badge less safe. This investigation isn't an attack, it's an opportunity to strengthen true law enforcement. His statement gave other officers permission to speak out. Some within the department began to quietly support reform. A few weeks later, Officer Marcus became the first to publicly testify as a whistleblower. He revealed that certain neighborhoods, mostly black and brown communities, had been labeled high-intensity enforcement zones, even when crime rates didn't justify it. Officers were told to monitor new residents who didn't fit the profile, which everyone knew meant minorities moving into white areas. Marcus's testimony proved what Alicia's data had already shown. The discrimination wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. His bravery came at a cost. His career was over. But Alicia had prepared for that. With the help of civil rights groups, she had built a support network to protect and assist whistleblowers. Knowing they weren't alone encouraged more officers to come forward. Even Helen Morris began to crack. The change started with the children. Emma kept asking about Nia, wondering why she couldn't play with her friend anymore. After weeks of hearing this, Clara Davis approached Alicia carefully. Emma wants to have a playdate with Nia, Clara said. I know it's complicated because of everything that's happened, but the girls miss each other. Maybe we could host it at our place. Neutral ground? Alicia hesitated. Nia was still seeing Dr. Evelyn for therapy, but the doctor had said normal social interactions would help her recover. When Alicia asked Nia, the girl smiled shyly and said she wanted to see Emma again. Alicia agreed to a supervised playdate. What no one expected was that Helen herself would bring Emma. The first few moments were awkward. This was the first time Alicia and Helen had seen each other since the incident. But the tension melted a little when the girls ran off to play, laughing together like nothing had ever happened. In the kitchen, Clara poured coffee and gently invited both women to sit. When Alicia mentioned Nia's therapy, Helen gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Therapy? Isn't that a bit much for such a small thing?" Alicia looked at her evenly. "Would you be willing to attend one of Nia's sessions?" she asked. "Dr. Evelyn has been documenting the emotional effects of what happened. Seeing it for yourself might help you understand." Helen blinked, surprised. After a moment, she nodded. "Maybe I will," she said, whether out of curiosity or disbelief. That decision, small as it seemed, would soon change everything. The following week, after getting Dr. Evelyn's professional approval and Nia's permission, Helen was allowed to watch one of Nia's therapy sessions. She sat behind a one-way mirror so she could see everything, but Nia couldn't see her. Nia was working with Dr. Evelyn through play therapy, a method that helps children express their trauma through toys and imagination. Helen watched as Nia picked up her dolls. One represented herself, and the others represented police officers. When the police dolls came near her self-doll, Nia shrank back, her little hands trembling. She looked afraid, even though she knew it was pretend. Then she whispered tearfully that she still checked all the windows every night before going to bed to make sure no police were coming to take her away. Helen felt her chest tighten as she watched. She had seen fear before, on the news, in movies, but seeing it in that small, trembling child hit her differently. It wasn't a headline or a story on TV. It was real. It was right there, in front of her. After the session ended, Helen and Dr. Evelyn went to his office. Helen sat silently, her hands folded in her lap. The usually confident woman, who used to speak loudly at neighborhood meetings, looked unsure for the first time. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't realize. I never thought." Her voice broke slightly. "I believed I was doing the right thing, protecting the neighborhood. But I never considered what it meant for her, what it would feel like to be that child." That moment changed something in Helen. She didn't hold a press conference or post online. Instead, she quietly stepped back. She stopped leading the anti-Alicia campaign. Over the next few weeks, neighbors noticed that the "Support Our Police" signs began disappearing from lawns. Helen's silence spoke louder than her old words ever had. The media also began to shift its focus. National outlets picked up the story, changing their headlines. It was no longer "Angry Mother Attacks Police," but "Military Hero Seeks Justice." But Alicia didn't like that label. In interviews, she said, "I'm not doing this as a former soldier. I'm doing this as a mother protecting her child and her community. The systems that failed my daughter are failing many others who don't have the resources or voice to fight back." Her honesty touched people from many different backgrounds. The story stopped being about politics or sides. It became about fairness and accountability. Then came a huge turning point. The U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division joined the state investigation. This made it a federal case, bringing in more power, more resources, and more national attention. Local officials could no longer sweep things under the rug. The threat of a federal takeover of the police department, something that would remove local control and bring in years of expensive reforms, suddenly became very real. The police union, which had refused to negotiate before, started to change its tone. "They're testing the waters," Jordan told Alicia's team during a strategy meeting. "They're trying to see if they can agree to some reforms before the federal government forces them into something worse." Alicia and her coalition were ready. They had spent months gathering community input and developing a detailed reform plan. Their list included a civilian oversight board with power to investigate and discipline officers, mandatory training in de-escalation and cultural awareness, strict body camera rules, open and fair handling of complaints, and special response teams that included mental health professionals for certain calls. At first, the police called these demands interference by people who didn't understand law enforcement. But once the state investigation's early findings began supporting Alicia's claims, their resistance started to collapse. An emergency city council meeting was called to deal with the crisis. The chamber was packed with reporters, residents, and police officers. Alicia stood at the podium. Her voice was steady but full of emotion as she shared Nia's experience, not just as her daughter's trauma, but as part of a larger pattern. She ended her speech with words that silenced the room. My daughter deserves to grow up in a community where those sworn to protect her don't become the source of her nightmares. Every child deserves that security, no matter their race or address. The question before you isn't whether to support the police or the community. It's whether you'll demand a standard of policing that protects everyone equally. Then, something shocking happened. Officer Jason, who had been quiet throughout, stood up and asked to speak. He admitted publicly that officers had been told to target certain neighborhoods and racial groups for more stops and arrests, even without reason. His words stunned the room. Hearing it from a police officer himself made it impossible to deny. After a tense debate, the council voted to create a temporary civilian oversight board, with Alicia as one of 7 members. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a step forward. Chief Robert barely survived a no-confidence vote. Though he technically kept his job, his authority was gone. The department's leadership was shaken, caught between undeniable evidence and growing public pressure. Alicia knew what this meant. It wasn't the end of the fight, just the beginning of a new chapter. This isn't victory, she told her team afterward. It's the start of a new phase. We're moving from exposing the problem to building real solutions. And that work will be just as hard. The power dynamics in Oakwood Heights had completely changed. For the first time, the police department was responding to the community instead of ignoring it. That night, when Alicia came home and told Nia about the council's decision, she saw her daughter smile. A small, tired smile, but one filled with hope. It was the first time Alicia had felt genuine optimism since the incident. 6 months later, the Georgia Attorney General's office released a massive 73-page report. It confirmed everything Alicia and her coalition had been saying. The report showed undeniable racial disparities in stops, arrests, and use of force. It even revealed that police leadership knew about these problems and ignored them. 2 weeks later, the U.S. Department of Justice released its own report, echoing the same findings. It said the Oakwood Heights Police Department had a pattern or practice of discrimination that violated the Constitution. Now, city officials had only 2 choices: make serious changes voluntarily, or face a court-ordered federal takeover. Consequences followed quickly. Officer Blake faced disciplinary charges and possible criminal prosecution after investigators found racist comments and evidence of repeated misconduct. Chief Robert, accused of covering up these practices, was forced to resign under pressure. Meanwhile, Officer Marcus, the one who had spoken out, was praised for his courage, even though it effectively ended his career in Oakwood Heights. Some police departments in other cities offered him new opportunities. Officer Jason, who had confessed publicly, faced a lighter punishment and was ordered to undergo more training and do community service. As the department went through this painful process, Alicia's role began to evolve. Because of her experience in both the military and healthcare, and her deep understanding of the community, she was invited to help design new training and policies for the department. At first, she hesitated. She didn't want to be used as a token or to help create fake reforms that looked good on paper but changed nothing. After talking with her coalition partners, though, she agreed. Real reform doesn't happen through documents, she said. It happens through daily decisions, through culture change. Being at the table means we can make sure our voices aren't ignored. The temporary oversight board soon became permanent, written into city law. It had real power to investigate complaints and recommend discipline. Alicia was offered the leadership position but turned it down. This isn't about power, she said. It's about fairness. Every person deserves to feel safe and respected by those who serve them. Rebuilding trust took time. The department launched community events where officers met with residents outside of enforcement situations. Police walked through neighborhoods, not to patrol, but to talk, listen, and learn. Youth programs paired officers with community mentors, helping children like Nia see police as human beings instead of threats. Alicia's house, once the headquarters for protests, became a space for honest discussion between community members and reformed police leaders. The biggest change for Alicia personally came from watching Nia heal. With therapy, community support, and visible changes around her, Nia slowly began to relax. The first time she went back to the park where everything had happened, she held her mother's hand tightly. A new community officer approached, keeping a respectful distance. He introduced himself kindly, explaining that he was part of the outreach team. Nia was nervous, but the officer's calmness and respect made the encounter peaceful. That small moment meant everything. Over time, Alicia herself began to heal too. The constant alertness that came from years of military service and recent trauma slowly eased. She still stayed aware, but she could finally breathe again. When the city settled the civil rights lawsuit, Alicia refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would silence her. The settlement included both financial compensation and a public apology admitting harm. Alicia used most of the money to start the Oakwood Heights Community Justice Foundation, which focused on police accountability and helping families harmed by discrimination. "This money came from taxpayers," she said. "It should help everyone, not just one family." Meanwhile, Helen Morris's transformation continued. She went from defending the police at every turn to speaking out about her own bias. At a community reconciliation event, she said, "I thought I was protecting my neighborhood. I never questioned why I saw some people as threats based on how they looked. That's prejudice. Recognizing it in myself has been painful, but it's necessary." Her honesty encouraged other residents to reflect on their own attitudes. True change, Alicia realized, couldn't just come from new rules. It had to come from people changing inside. To make that change last, Alicia worked with the local school district to create educational programs about civil rights, community responsibility, and fair treatment. These lessons, taught from elementary through high school, help students learn not only about injustice but also about how to build a better community themselves. Soon, other cities noticed what Oakwood Heights was doing. They invited Alicia and her team to help them design their own reforms before they reached a crisis. What began as one community's tragedy became a model for change across the region. Even as her public role grew, Alicia stayed focused on protecting Nia's privacy. Media outlets kept asking for interviews, but she chose carefully, always putting her daughter first. Eventually, Alicia was invited to testify before the state legislature about a new police reform bill based on Oakwood Heights' success. Her message was clear: reform isn't measured by policies written but by changes people actually experience. We need results, not promises. A year after the incident, the community held a healing ceremony in the same park where Nia's fear had begun. The event wasn't about celebration but reflection. Nia, now more confident, read a poem she had written about fear, courage, and change. Her voice was calm and strong. Alicia watched with pride and sadness. Pride for her daughter's bravery, sadness that such bravery had been necessary. The ceremony ended with everyone planting a peace garden at the park's entrance. Flowers of all colors filled the soil that had once witnessed pain. It became a living reminder of growth, healing, and unity. After the crowd left, Alicia stood quietly by the new garden. A young police officer approached her, part of the new outreach program. "Ms. Grant," he said respectfully, "I just wanted to thank you. What you started here, it's making us better officers. It's making this a department I'm proud to serve in." Alicia smiled softly. She knew the system wasn't perfect and probably never would be. But it had changed, and that change mattered. Standing in the same park where her daughter had once cried in terror, she now watched Nia laugh and play freely. For the first time in a long while, Alicia felt peace. 2 years after the incident, Alicia walked Nia to school. The streets looked familiar but felt different. Safer, calmer. Officer Luis, part of the reform department, nodded politely as they passed. Alicia returned the greeting with quiet confidence. The Oakwood Heights Community Police Oversight Board was now fully functional. Use of force had dropped by 63%. Citizen complaints had fallen by nearly half. Response times were finally equal across all neighborhoods. No more long waits for minority families. The city wasn't perfect, but it had grown stronger, fairer, and more united. And as Alicia watched her daughter wave goodbye before walking into school, she knew that the long, painful journey had been worth every step. The new police chief, Camille Porter, came to Oakwood Heights with a clear promise. She wanted to rebuild trust between the police and the community through fairness and honesty. Her goal was what she called constitutional policing, which meant following both the law and the values of justice, not just enforcing rules. When she arrived, the police department was still dealing with reforms that had been forced on them by outside groups after the big conflict that had shaken the town. Many officers had treated those changes like a punishment or a burden. But Chief Porter didn't see it that way. She made it clear that these reforms weren't something to resist, they were a chance to become better. Under her leadership, what started as outside pressure slowly became a set of core values inside the department. She reminded her officers that accountability was not a weakness, but a form of strength. Over time, the department's culture began to change. The officers stopped seeing community oversight as an attack and started seeing it as a shared responsibility. What once had been resistance slowly became ownership. Meanwhile, Alicia Grant's life also began to find balance again after years of intense struggle. The fight for police reform had consumed nearly every part of her world, but now she was finally able to breathe. Her advocacy work continued, but it no longer ruled her every moment. At the hospital, her professional role had grown. She now led a community health initiative that focused on improving people's lives beyond the walls of the clinic. The program worked on things like food access, housing support, and mental health resources, factors that affected health long before anyone stepped into a doctor's office. Her responsibilities on the Police Oversight Board continued as well. She attended monthly meetings, reviewed occasional cases, and made sure the accountability standards were being followed. But the work no longer took over her nights and weekends. The campaign that had once felt like a full-time battle had now become a sustainable part of her life. Most importantly, her relationship with her daughter, Nia, had healed. During the hardest parts of the fight, their bond had been stretched thin. There were nights when Alicia was too exhausted to talk, too distracted to listen. Nia had felt her mother's love, but also her absence. Now, that distance is gone. Their evenings together had returned, the warm routines of reading side by side, talking about their day, or just sitting together in comfortable silence. Both of them now understood how precious these small moments were. They also created a new tradition together: weekly self-defense lessons. At first, it was about safety. Alicia wanted her daughter to feel strong and capable. But these sessions became something deeper. They learned not only physical defense, but also mental readiness and emotional control. "This isn't just about fighting back," Alicia told her one evening as they practiced. "It's about being aware, staying calm, and knowing when to act. It's about recognizing danger before it grows and finding help when you need it." Nia, still young but deeply observant, soaked up these lessons. She didn't carry bitterness from their past struggles. Instead, she took these teachings and shaped them into a way of seeing the world, alert, confident, but full of hope. The neighborhood itself had changed as well. Oakwood Heights had once been divided and distrustful. Now, it has turned into a model of community connection. The people who had come together during the crisis didn't just go back to normal life. They built something stronger. Regular block meetings became a permanent routine where neighbors talked through issues before they became big problems. A local emergency response team formed to help during storms or power outages. People even created volunteer groups to assist elderly residents with chores, home repairs, or rides to the doctor. What began as a defensive movement to protect the vulnerable had become a proactive network that brought everyone closer together. Different races, backgrounds, and ages now worked side by side. Alicia's home, once fortified against possible threats, had become a gathering place. The same house where she had once watched for danger now welcomed people for community dinners, youth activities, and planning meetings. It was a place where new friendships were formed and old divisions slowly healed. Her friendship with Clara Davis, which had started during the reform campaign, deepened too. They had different life experiences, different races, different backgrounds, but those differences made them stronger partners. Together, they became known as bridge builders, people who could connect groups that rarely saw eye to eye. They led by example, showing that unity didn't mean sameness, it meant shared purpose. Perhaps the biggest surprise was the change in Helen Morris. Once one of the loudest voices against reform, Helen had gone through her own powerful transformation. After witnessing Nia's therapy session, a moment that forced her to see things from a new perspective, she began to confront her own biases and fears. It wasn't easy. At first, she simply stepped back, choosing silence over opposition. Then, slowly, she began supporting positive changes. Within 2 years, she became an advocate for accountability, speaking out for fairness in policing. During a community event marking the 2nd anniversary of the reforms, Helen stood up and spoke publicly. "I had to face some hard truths," she said. "My fears and prejudices made me see threats where there were none. That realization was painful, but it also freed me. I'm grateful this community didn't give up on me, even when I stood in the way." The police officers involved in the original case had each taken different paths. Officer Marcus had joined the department's training division, using his military experience and integrity to help teach new officers about respectful community engagement and preventing bias. His example helped others learn how to handle difficult situations without resorting to aggression. Officer Jason, who had also been part of the original incident, went through extensive retraining. He later joined the community policing unit, working mostly with youth programs. He admitted his past mistakes openly and made clear efforts to change. Over time, his willingness to learn rebuilt trust. Other officers began studying his methods as models of positive engagement. Officer Blake, however, had been convicted of civil rights violations. He was banned from ever serving as a police officer again. His case became a cautionary tale across the region, a reminder of how prejudice and misuse of power could destroy both trust and careers. Even though the system still wasn't perfect, no system ever truly is, it had improved in real, lasting ways. The partnership between community members and reform-minded officials showed what persistence could achieve. Oakwood Heights' success began to spread. Other towns and counties reached out to learn from their model, and sometimes Alicia was invited to consult on how to apply similar reforms elsewhere. Despite her huge role, Alicia never liked being treated as a hero. When she received a National Civil Rights Award for her leadership, her speech was brief and humble. "I didn't win this fight," she said. "We did. And it's not over." Real change doesn't happen once. It has to be protected and renewed every day. Her humility also showed at home. When Nia made a school project about everyday heroes, she proudly included her mother alongside historical civil rights leaders. Alicia was touched, but she reminded her daughter, the most important kind of heroism isn't about being famous or brave in one big moment. It's about staying committed to what's right day after day. As time passed, Alicia came to see her whole journey in a new light. She realized that she had never stopped serving her country. She had only changed her mission. Her military years had taught her discipline, strategy, and courage. Now she used those same skills not on foreign battlefields but in her own community. She had shifted from being a soldier defending a nation to a protector of justice at home. One warm spring evening, she and Nia sat together on their porch swing. Children laughed and played on the sidewalks. A police car passed by slowly. The officer inside waved respectfully, not suspiciously, not with tension, just a simple, friendly wave. It was a small gesture, but for Alicia, it meant everything. It showed how much their world had changed. Her constant vigilance had softened into calm awareness. The training that once made her feel burdened now gave her quiet confidence. "Do you think we'll ever move away from here?" Nia asked, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Alicia smiled, thinking deeply before answering. "This is our home," she said softly. "We didn't run away, we transformed it." As the sun set and the streetlights came on, Alicia noticed a moving van parked across the street. A new family, a black family with young kids around Nia's age, was moving in. Years ago, such a family might have been greeted with suspicion or hostility. But now, several neighbors had already walked over to welcome them, offering to help unload boxes or sharing information about local stores and schools. Alicia watched, her heart full of quiet satisfaction. These newcomers might never know the long fight it took to make this neighborhood truly welcoming. The meetings, the marches, the sleepless nights, the risks. But that was the point. Real progress means that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles. Tomorrow, Alicia would go over and introduce herself. Tonight, she just wanted to sit back and appreciate what they had built. She thought about how it had all started, with Nia's tears, after a moment of injustice that changed everything. What began as one mother's protective instinct had grown into a movement of transformation. The change would help children she would never meet and families who would never know her name. Some battles are fought for quick victory. Others are fought for transformation that lasts long after the fight ends. Alicia had fought both, using her discipline as a soldier and her love as a mother to shape a safer, fairer world. Her greatest success wasn't the award or the recognition. It was something much simpler. The sight of children playing safely in a community where safety and justice belong to everyone, no matter their race or background. Some battles you fight for victory, she thought, watching the new family settle into their home. Others you fight for transformation. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more kind and powerful stories. Watch our next video for another unforgettable journey. And share this story with someone who needs it today.